213. Let's get to Ghost in the Shell, the live action film, which came out in 2017. Directed by Rupert Sanders, stars Scarlett Johansson, Pilo Asbeck, Takashi Kitano, Juliette Binoche, Michael Pitt. And the synopsis is: in the near future, Major Myra Killian is the first of her kind, a human saved from a terrible crash who is cyber enhanced to be a perfect soldier devoted to stopping the world's most dangerous criminals. I'm not a big anime fan. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but there's just something about a lot of the shows, especially that I have trouble really getting invested in. So I don't have a deep knowledge of that aside from what I hear from friends and coworkers. But Ghost in the Shell just seems to be the one that has always interested me the most, and I've watched, I think, all the movies and then some of the shows. So when it was announced, this movie, I was very excited. I love Scarlett Johansson. Rupert Sanders had just done Snow White and the Huntsman, and he just did The Crow most recently, which I've not seen yet, but I really like Snow White and the Huntsman, and I enjoyed this one a fair bit as well. First off, the movie looks amazing. Rupert Sanders just has a great eye, which really connects with me. I'm not sure exactly the reason even, but I think all of his movies look fantastic. He can do the darker gothic stuff like Snow White, and then he can do the very colorful ones like Ghost in the Shell. By far the biggest strength is Scarlett Johansson. I understand that the whole whitewashing thing, it's not great. But obviously, speaking about it realistically, this is a $150 million Hollywood film, give or take. So, end of the day, you're having to cast people who are giving this one more of a chance purely from a financial level. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. Hollywood is always going to do that. Everything from her physicality to walking very robotic-like, that easily could have become very goofy and taken you out of it. But while it's noticeable how she walks and how she moves her arms and, going left, right, that sort of thing, I think it's as authentic as it could be. If she were not in this, or if they had a lesser actor, it would have been a disaster. What sort of makes the movie suffer, talking negatives for a minute, I don't mind, in theory, I like that it is only about 100 minutes. It's a tight, linear, no-nonsense narrative. But I feel like if you're doing a live-action film of this huge world, maybe even make it 2 hours, because there's so many ideas going on in this that, as opposed to, let's say, Blade Runner 2049, where that one is almost 3 hours, maybe too long, for some people at least, they spent the time to really talk and explore the concepts that they were bringing up. Whereas in this, it feels like every scene, there's some new concept, whether it's dealing with AI and humans, or reality, or technology. It's really brushed by. Because I guess maybe I don't know if they just had to devote all the money to those visuals or to Scarlett Johansson. I don't know, but I feel like that part of the movie makes it feel much more shallow. Like it's never going to be to the lengths or the heights of Blade Runner or some of the other, or like Her or Ex Machina. Like it's not going to be, to me, it's never going to be a 5 out of 5 film, which is okay. Casting otherwise, though, I know some people don't like it, aside from, if we're putting aside the whitewashing thing for a second. One of my favorite parts, aside from Johansson, is Michael Pitt as Kuze, the villain. The scene when Major and Kuze first meet, when he traps her in that cybernetic cave, and we first get a glimpse at him, that character design, that performance, that sound work is amazing to me. the look of the body where some parts are exposed and you see the wires, the long hair, the glitchy, stuttery speech. And then, even though it doesn't go as deep as it could, the motivation of him being someone who was experimented on and then thrown away is a very good human motivation to somewhat relate to him. Because you can only imagine what it would be like for you, and obviously you would be angry. Maybe, yeah, you shouldn't become a terrorist, but having his anger and that frustration and that severe trauma and wanting to have revenge on all those people, that does make sense for someone in his position. The opening credit design or sequence is very impressive and very much calls back to the original movie. The action sequence that starts with Kuze hacking the garbage men, I love that it doesn't feel the need to explain that. It just shows, all right, these people are hacked. Let's move forward. The interrogation of that garbage man when he's in that glass cell and Major comes in, then suddenly Kuze hacks the guy and starts speaking through him, and it's a very unnerving, unsettling visual and sound design yet again. Now, got to talk about the whitewashing stuff more in depth. So, from what I get from the movie or how they tried to explain it, is Major was not originally a white person, but then when Major was severely injured and disfigured, they replaced her with what would be the body or face of Scarlett Johansson. And so it's not like saying you were a white person living in Asia. It was, this is the body that we had, and therefore she has a mother that is not Caucasian. I think if you're going to do it one way, I guess that's a way to do it that obviously people were still very offended by it, and I'm not going to say that's a good way to do it, because it's, end of the day, it's whitewashing. The score is very solid by Clint Mansell and Lauren Balfe, two great composers. The third act, because of the runtime, it does feel short, too short even. I don't find that the actual pacing of that scene feels rushed, but especially when I saw it for the first time in theaters, I was thinking, wait, it's already over? Like, that's it? Because the action sequence is good. I like that final sequence with that big robot that is in the original one as well. And there's the moment that she is pulling on the top of the robot and her fake skin is tearing and the wires, and that still looks great, both in this one and the anime. Still, it goes by so quickly that it's not super satisfying because it is just a good versus bad fight, and that's it. And the movie has a very short epilogue and game over. That's it. So the third act would by far be my least favorite because it feels like what shallow ideas or what ideas were touched on in the first two are, there's no time for that in the third act. The ambush on Aramaki, the leader of Major or the boss, that's a very visceral part of the film when the shooters have those black masks on, but then he ends up taking them all down. Veering off a little bit for a moment and talking about AI movies as a whole and the ones I'm talking about, one thing that I personally connect with and really enjoy and seek out about films dealing with robots, AI, whatever, is that it usually delves into something dealing with identity, reality, outcasts, being misunderstood, loneliness. And that's something that I just immediately connect with more often than not, and I appreciate and I get more emotionally connected to as well. This one, I know a lot of people don't like it at all, but despite the story issues and other things, Scarlett Johansson's performance and that character of Major trying to figure out who she is, always being that one person in the world who is like her, or almost, I guess, in terms of Kuze, she finds out, but really being very alone and having to go through the world and through her life feeling always different because she is actually. She's not just feeling different, she actually is different. Overall, it's one of the better, more mainstream sci-fi films of the last 7 or 8 years. I can go back to it. It's always entertaining. It's always insightful. So that's a win for me. That is a heavy 4 out of 5.